It was a difficult weekend here in Israel, with some good news and also plenty of bad news. The IDF bombed a Hamas weapons depot on the outskirts of Damascus in Syria, while Hezbollah operatives were eliminated in Lebanon, while it was reported in Lebanon that 6 people were killed and 2 wounded in a drone strike near the Syrian border. There was also some good news and bad news in Lebanon's political scene, as for the first time in a very, very long time, the formation of a new government coalition was announced. The new Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, promised to lead reforms, but despite everyone's best efforts and the United States pressure, Hezbollah managed to include itself in the coalition. A bit further south, IDF, Shin Bet, and police forces operated in a nighttime counter-terrorism activity in the city of Nablus in the area of Samaria. While all of this was going on, Israel once again received 3 released hostages, but this time the joy we had at seeing them was mixed with horror at their appearance, which made it clear that they had survived hellish conditions. The release was also once again accompanied by a shocking performance that finally provoked a response even from the Red Cross. The 3 hostages released on Saturday, Or, Eli, and Ohad, were released in poor health after 491 days of captivity. They suffered from severe malnutrition, internal muscle damage, and complete disconnection, being unaware of the tragedies that befell their families in the massacre of October 7, 2023. Responses came quickly from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and United States President Donald Trump's administration, with Netanyahu declaring, "We will do everything to bring back all the hostages, but Hamas will not remain there." And the administration spokesperson said, "We will not stop until everyone returns." And speaking of returns, as Saturday's hostages were being released, Hamas paraded them before the cameras and even made some last-minute attempts at psychological torture. One of the Hamas spokesmen asked Eli Sharabi, one of the hostages, to share his feelings as he stood on the Hamas stage surrounded by heavily armed and masked terrorists. Sharabi said that he was expecting to meet his wife and children. Only at the hospital was Sharabi informed that his wife and children were murdered by Hamas on October 7th. These scenes were not just torturing the hostages, but the entire Israeli public was suffering together with them. The taunting and shocking appearance of these hostages invokes memories of the worst chapters in Jewish history and causes us to relive our worst nightmares. Around the world, there is also outrage as reports in the British Telegraph news portal spoke of a final torment in the release ceremony. Around the world, no one can swallow Hamas's lack of humanity. All of this raises questions about what are Israel's options after this horror show, and what is the delegation departing for Doha, Qatar this week planning to do regarding Phase B of the deal. Meanwhile, despite international opposition, the IDF is preparing a plan to transfer Gaza residents through Israel to neighboring countries in accordance with the plan that President Donald Trump spoke of last week. However, inside the Gaza Strip, things are changing quickly. The order has been given, and for the first time since it was captured, the IDF will completely withdraw from the Netzarim corridor. That's what the agreement requires. However, the IDF did not respond to the completion of the withdrawal, nor did the political echelon, which is also threatening a counter-response to Hamas's horror show. At the same time, the IDF is preparing to prevent celebrations during the release of Palestinian terrorists from Israeli prisons. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Middle East, there was a summit of evil in Tehran at the same time as the world was watching the shocking spectacle in the Gaza Strip. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei met with senior Hamas figures and congratulated them on their so-called victory over the United States and Israel, adding that the victory of Palestine is a central issue for us. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 492 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, all the Shiite militias in Iraq, and the Palestinian armed groups in Judea and Samaria, all of which are acting under the control of the Revolutionary Guards Corps in Iran, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. Before we begin, I want to invite you to click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. In this report, I also want to give you a chance to be part of something very powerful, as Israel is rebuilding after unimaginable destruction. Acres of forests were lost because of Hezbollah rocket attacks, but together we can restore what was taken. So stay tuned to find out how you can make a lasting impact and help renew the land of Israel. But first, the news. The Israeli Air Force launched strikes on Saturday on terror targets in two locations, one in the southern Lebanon and the other in southern Syria. According to the IDF spokesperson's unit, the strikes were carried out under the guidance of the Intelligence Directorate and were intended to strike the terror infrastructure of Hezbollah and Hamas. The IDF stated that Hezbollah operatives were observed at the site used for the production and storage of the organization's strategic weapons in the Bekaa Valley in that area of southern Lebanon. This is a violation of the ceasefire agreement, so the decision was made to strike them. The IDF statement emphasized that they will continue to act to remove such threats. This announcement came shortly after a statement that fighter jets had attacked a weapons depot in the Deir Eli area of southern Syria. This is an area that belongs to the Hamas terrorist organization. According to the IDF, the weaponry stored in this depot was intended for use in attacks against IDF forces. In the IDF announcement, it was noted that the Palestinian terror organization, primarily Hamas, operate within Syrian territory under Iranian sponsorship and guidance in order to enhance their strength. It was further stressed that the IDF will continue to act against the attempts at entrenchment and strengthening of the terror organizations wherever they operate in order to safeguard the security of the State of Israel. And speaking of security for Israel, IDF forces, the Shin Bet, and the Israeli police operated overnight between Friday and Saturday in the city of Nablus as part of counter-terrorism activity. During the operation, the forces located explosive devices in a suspicious building and destroyed them. The activity was carried out in the Samaria Brigade area as part of the ongoing security efforts in the region. This is one of a series of operations carried out by the security forces in the Judean Samaria area in recent times. Within the framework of the activity, a wanted individual was arrested and weapons were confiscated. There were no casualties among the security forces. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on what is happening in the military arena, as the IDF never rests for a moment and defends us day and night. Our next topic broke hearts around the world. Let's dive into the intimidating spectacle of the despicable terrorists of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The drama started last Friday evening when Hamas delayed handing over the list of hostages who will be freed the following day. But then, already in the early hours of the morning, preparations began in the Gaza Strip for the release of the hostages Ohad Ben Ami, Eli Sherabi, and Or Levi. As with the previous releases, Hamas set up a stage in Deir el-Balah in central Gaza that would be used for photographing the hostages. On the stage, a sign was hung that read "The Ultimate Victory," along with a picture of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is currently in the United States as part of his visit to the White House. It was also written on the release stage, "We are the Tufa. We are the day after," in a direct message seemingly aimed at US President Donald Trump following statements about the plan to evacuate Gaza Strip residents. During their ceremony to release the hostages, the Hamas terrorists forced them to speak to the crowd and for the cameras, asking taunting questions to elicit a response that would make the hostages appear scared and confused. In additional footage from the Gaza Strip, another terrorist was documented carrying an Israeli weapon that, according to Hamas, was stolen during the fighting on October 7th. In any case, the release of Ohad Ben Ami, Eli Sharabi, and Or Levi is a painful turning point in our understanding of hostage releases. If until now we had seen hostages return home in tolerable physical condition, today it's clear to everyone that from now on, the condition of future releases will only be more severe. It is highly likely that the hostages we receive going forward will arrive with severe and complex physical and psychological harm, and it is known that some of them will no longer come back alive. The hostages are now returning from the realm of the dead. The stomach turns at these horrifying Hamas shows during the release of the hostages in the Gaza Strip and harsh images of Or Levi, Ohad Ben Ami, and Eli Sharabi after 491 days in captivity, yet Israel's possible responses are limited. Reducing humanitarian aid is one option, but that would constitute a breach of the agreement, as would delaying the release of Palestinian prisoners. Of course, there is also the possibility of terminating the ceasefire agreement altogether, but it's hard to believe that Israel would want to do something like that when it can still free the hostages. In effect, Israel has no significant leverage at the moment, and despite its desire to respond harshly to Hamas's cynical use of hostages during the time of the release, there is little capacity to do much right now, and also due to the desire to free as many hostages as possible, perhaps even more than 33 in Phase A. Israel is not expected to break the rules, but anger at Hamas is preparing the ground for a return to fighting at the end of Phase A if they fail to extend it. Towards the evening, a political source said that upon completing the release phase, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu introduced a negotiation delegation to be sent to Doha, Qatar, aiming to discuss the technical details of the agreement with the mediators who are also talking to Hamas. The source said that when this delegation returns to Israel and reports on what happened, Netanyahu will convene a political security cabinet meeting regarding the negotiations on the second stage of the deal. In related news, White House's National Security Advisor Mike Waltz promised Saturday evening that the Trump administration will continue to work for the release of all remaining hostages in Hamas captivity. And President Trump is determined in his mission and will not stop until we bring all the hostages back home. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also addressed the condition of the hostages released on Saturday, declaring, "Once again, we have seen what Hamas monsters are. These are the same monsters who slaughtered our civilians and abused our hostages, and I tell them again, their blood is on their heads." Now, I have something to say to all the people who have marched in the streets on university campuses and elsewhere in support of Hamas and against Israel over the past 16 months. Look at these pictures and think about how many times you have talked about hunger in the Gaza Strip. Who in those pictures looks starved? Who looks malnourished? The terrorists? The Gazan residents? No, our hostages. Only them. They look like Holocaust survivors, while the Hamas terrorists standing next to them don't look like they've skipped any meals recently. In addition to that, think about what we've just seen and the sheer cruelty of the Hamas terrorists who couldn't resist the temptation to take one last shot of psychological torture at these hostages a few moments before handing them over to the Red Cross. One of Hamas's spokesmen asked Eli Sharabi to share his feelings. Sharabi said he hoped to meet his wife and children. Only at the hospital was Sharabi informed that his wife and children have been murdered in their home in Be'eri, in a kibbutz in Israel. The terrorist who asked Sharabi this question probably knew that, and he just wanted to hurt this poor man one last time while he still could. Eli is returning from one impossible reality in captivity to a most difficult reality in Israel, said officials in kibbutz Be'eri. A reality in which those most precious to him are no longer alive. Eli lost on October 7th his daughters, Noya, 16 years of age, and Yahal, 13 years of age, and his wife, Lian, 48 years old, who were murdered in their houses in Be'eri in the terrible massacre. His brother, Yossi Sherabi, was murdered in captivity, and his body is still being held in the Gaza Strip. We will hug and give them the best possible support. I think I speak of all Israelis and decent people everywhere when I say that this display of barbaric cruelty cannot go unanswered. Hamas has been badly damaged, but it is still on its feet, and this can't be allowed to continue. They need to be sorted out, and I believe they will be. It is already beginning to happen, as the Bloomberg news agency has reported that Israel has identified an airport and a seaport as potential points for exit for Palestinians from the destroyed Gaza Strip. This is being done in accordance with a draft plan presented to Defense Minister Israel Katz regarding the implementation of the United States President Donald Trump on his proposal last week. Preliminary ideas were presented to Minister Katz in a military briefing on Thursday, according to an Israeli official familiar with the discussions who spoke with Bloomberg. Katz ordered the military to draw up a roadmap for Trump's proposal, despite the uncertainty about its ability to win the required international support or about where Gaza residents would be willing or able to go to. And meanwhile, to no one's surprise, the proposal to relocate more than 2 million Gazan residents to make room for United States-led reconstruction was quickly rejected by Palestinian and Middle Eastern entities, as well as by several Western governments. Despite these potential roadblocks, Israel is taking steps to be prepared if the plan to move forward, and the IDF is in the process of determining which of the 5 border crossings between Gaza and Israel would allow safe exit for Palestinians after they undergo security checks. According to the plan, Gaza residents would be bused to Ramon Airport, from which Israel has already flown a small number of Palestinian casualties from Gaza for treatment abroad, or to the port of Ashdod. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update, but more than anything else, today, we and the State of Israel need you. We are launching a campaign for the reconstruction of Israel in which you can take part of. Since October 7th, Israel has faced devastating destruction. Thousands of rockets have scarred the land, and over 57,000 acres of forest have been lost. But now, we have an opportunity to restore and rebuild. As we approach Tu B'Shvat, the holiday of planting and renewal, we invite you to take part in a movement of hope and healing. Every tree we are planting represents resilience, faith, and renewal. These trees will rise from the ashes, standing tall as symbols of Israel's strength and determination. Now, it's time for you to take part in this effort. So please go to www.tbn.org/rebuildisrael and make a contribution that will help sow the seeds for a better tomorrow. Your support will directly help replant the land and renew the future of Israel, and help us share the truth of what is happening in this land. Because love is stronger than hate, faith is stronger than destruction, and together we will rise again. Thank you, and now let's go back to the news. While the Hamas terrorists were making an evil spectacle of the release of Israeli hostages, Hamas big shots were making another spectacle in Tehran, the capital of Iran. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, hosted several Hamas officials on Saturday morning, including the terror organization's leader, Khalil el-Hayya. If you never heard of this man, I don't blame you. It can be very difficult to keep track of Hamas leaders, as they are appointed and then exit the scene so quickly these days. In any case, the meeting was also attended by the head of Hamas's Shura Council, Muhammad Ismail Darwish, and senior official in the organization, Nitzar Audallah, who are members of the Defense Council that was formed in Hamas after the elimination of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Khamenei told the officials who met him that the American threats have no effect on Iran and its senior officials. The Palestinian issue is a central one for us, and so is the victory of Palestine. It is the duty of the entire Islamic world today and of all supporters of the resistance to help the inhabitants of Gaza and alleviate their suffering. He added, "You, Hamas, defeated the United States and Israel and prevented them from achieving their goals." Additionally, the Iranian Fars news agency reported that Khamenei said a day will come when you resolve the matter of Jerusalem for the Islamic world. Other Iranian media outlets reported that Hamas delegation responded that it appreciates the continued support of Iran and the Iranian people. It's important to remember that this week, the United States President Donald Trump signed a renewal of the maximum pressure policy campaign against Iran. This means the return of the heavy sanctions policy he imposed during his first term on the Islamic Republic. Trump said that Iran is too close to nuclear weapons, warning that if Tehran decides to assassinate him in response, Iran would be destroyed. He stated that he left instructions about what to do if Tehran actually assassinates him. Prior to Trump's signing, an American official said the aim is to deny Iran any path to acquiring nuclear weapons and to fight its malicious influence. And under the sanctions, the hope is to reduce Iranian oil exports to zero. A moment before we continue, I want to ask you to once again click that subscribe button so that you always stay updated to events in Israel. You can also visit our real-time updated Israeli news website, tbnisrael.com, the site that brings you everything about what is happening in Israel in between video updates. And getting back to the situation in Gaza, the release of these Israeli hostages was of course accompanied by the release of Palestinian security prisoners from Israeli jails. These prisoners received a gift from the Israeli prison service upon their release. It was a bracelet on which was written in Arabic, "The eternal people, do not forget, I will pursue our enemies and overtake them." Signs with familiar wordings were hung outside the prison facilities in Israel. A source in the Palestinian Authority for Prisoners Affairs responded to the move. This is an act of provocation, but beyond that, it changes nothing. All the prisoners removed the IPS uniforms, including the bracelet. The Red Cross criticized this, but on Sunday, it also finally issued a statement declaring that Hamas needs to give the hostages a dignified and private release and dispense with all the drama and the nonsense that had accompanied the release of the hostages up until now. In any case, through the Israeli prison service, 183 terrorists were released, including 18 serving life sentences for committing terror activities against Israelis. Those released also included 111 prisoners who were arrested during Operation Iron Swords. In that list, it's hard to ignore top terror figures, including Hatem el-Juyusi, considered one of the founders of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, a terror organization active in Judea and Samaria, who was sentenced to 6 life sentences after being convicted of murdering 6 Israelis in the Second Intifada, the terrorist uprising. Shadi Barghouti, sentenced to 27 years for his involvement in terror attacks, is also amongst the dangerous prisoners who walked free this morning, and along with his father, Fakhri Marghouti, who also took part in the murdering of Israelis. Here at TBN Israel, we will keep updating you on every development, so please keep following us and support us by clicking that subscribe button. Moving on to the Lebanon sector, there were some remarkable developments over the weekend. After more than 2 years of temporary transition rule, a new cabinet has been formed, even though the West, led by the United States and Israel, demanded removing Hezbollah from the Lebanese cabinet. A new government led by former international judge Nawaf Salam decided to bring the organization in and tie itself deeper into Lebanon. 5 portfolios in the cabinet were given to Hezbollah and Amal, blatantly ignoring international pressure. Salam swore to promote economic reforms but also emphasized the demand for Israel to withdraw from the Lebanese land. President Joseph Aoun approved 24 ministers, amongst them a former minister identified with a party opposing Hezbollah, but decision makers remain stuck in a volatile and dangerous regional reality, deepening Lebanon's isolation. Also, over the weekend, forces loyal to the new regime in Syria clashed with Hezbollah forces as they attempted to retrieve weapons and ammunition stored in a warehouse inside Syrian territory close to the border. The Syrian forces pursued the Hezbollah forces into the Lebanese territory and inflicted heavy casualties on them. This might be the start of a new conflict, and here at TBN Israel we'll keep an eye open and let you know what is happening on real time. We will also continue to update you on the condition of the Israeli hostages that are being held captive in Gaza and the drama surrounding their release. I ask you to pray for the returning hostages as the release of Eli Sharabi, Ohad Ben Ami, and Or Levi on Saturday revealed the very serious medical condition that the remaining hostages are in. One of the experts involved in their treatment explained there are invisible damages as a result of the poor diet. A process of internal muscle breakdown has begun in the hostages, starting in the heart muscle through the rib muscles responsible for breathing and ending in the intestinal muscles. The result is multi-system damage whose rehabilitation is complex and long-term. So, today, let's pray for their welfare and mental resilience as they return, and I ask you to keep spreading the truth, and most importantly, keep praying on a daily basis. Pray for the rest of our hostages that are held by Hamas, and continue to pray for the IDF soldiers wherever they may be. If they're fighting in the Gaza Strip, if they're fighting in Lebanon, in Syria, in Judea and Samaria, they need your prayers. And the most important thing you can do is keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. And together we will win this war because God is on our side.